Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, April 14th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about the moderate Democrats that were just recently ousted in the 2020 House elections and their formation of a new political action committee to prevent other moderates from being defeated in 2022. This is a messaging-based political action committee that is going to be focusing on these swing districts with Democrats that represent both Republicans and Democrats and that vote that way in the House of Representatives. This is an article that was released a little bit a while ago, I think actually around 12 days ago. I don't know how I missed it. I meant to discuss this. I had this saved up in terms of content that I wrote down and I was planning on producing. Don't know how I missed it on my list here, but here we are. It's still relevant and will continue to be relevant for the next year and a half. So this article doesn't necessarily go too in-depth. It's from Axios, and it has shown us just a few bullet points here that we can read through, offer a little bit more insight as to what these House Democrats are trying to do and what this messaging will mean for the 2022 midterm elections. So let's get started. It first says that this question of why it matters, and it pretty much just tells us that during a midterm election year, you will see the opposition party win a number of seats against the incumbent party. The reason for that is due to unpopularity, due to a referendum against the incumbent president at the time. Well, what's happening here and what happened in previous elections in the 21st century is that the opposition party almost always picks up seats and sometimes, in most cases actually, regains House control or maintains House control as the opposition party. And that's what happened for the Democrats in 2018, for the Republicans in 2014, 2010, and for the Democrats in 2006. And since the House majority is much narrower than where it was back in 2018. I mean, you can see the difference from red to blue on the overall map. The Democratic Party is in the narrowest House majority we've seen since 2003, which means nearly 20 years have passed and the House is now the closest it's ever been. And the Democrats are 4 seats away from no longer being in control of the United States House of Representatives. And just looking at these Democrats that are now focusing on this political action committee and, in a sense, trying to argue this point, many of them were recently ousted by Republicans that used this sort of campaign messaging or campaign style that was very similar to President Trump and pretty much rode his coattails all the way to the United States House of Representatives. Now, when I'm looking at the list here, there are a few Democrats that are currently in office and a few Republicans that have taken up some of these seats of former Democrats. But the main thing is that all of these Democrats here represent what we like to call swing districts. Districts that have moved back and forth between the GOP over different election cycles and are very keen on electing moderates, meaning representatives that can represent every member of a constituency at least to some degree. And when you're looking at these individual House districts, you will notice that the 3 here that were mentioned in this Axios article are from New Mexico's 2nd District, South Carolina's 1st District, and Oklahoma's 5th District. Now, the thing that these 3 seats have in common were that they were pickups for the Republican Party in 2020. The same thing in common in 2018, they were pickups for the Democratic Party. In fact, some of these seats were viewed as out of the ordinary entirely. The first one being Oklahoma's 5th Congressional District. When you look at that district, this was rated safe for the GOP. There was no consideration that a Democrat would have any realistic shot at winning the 5th district. New York Times rated it as safe. Most pundits rated it as safe. Some people caught on 2-3 weeks out before the election, but the main takeaway was that Oklahoma's 5th district was going to be solid for the GOP. Well, that ended up not being true. A very similar characterization was made of South Carolina's 1st District with Joe Cunningham. He won here by 1.4%. Looking over, this was an open race, by the way, but looking over at New Mexico's 2nd District, this had recently gone to a Republican. But then a Democrat picked it up after 2018. But then, come 2020, these House Republicans ended up winning these seats and are now serving in these 3 Democratic areas amongst many. And it's not just there. The Republican Party picked up a total of 15 seats from various parties. Whether it's independents or Democrats, the main takeaway here is that the GOP had a net gain of 12. All expectations pointed to the Democratic Party expanding their House majority. This was a very poor performance for the Democratic Party. A very poor one in any scenario. In 2018, they won back control of the House. In 2016, on the presidential ballot in which Donald Trump won, the Democrats still gained 6 seats. In 2012, the Democrats gained 8 seats, and just looking at the overall partisan composition, in every presidential election in the 21st century, the Democratic Party has gained seats with the exception of 1. And the thing is, it actually might not even be an exception of 1, I'm assuming it's 2004, but the thing is that the Democratic Party should have expanded their seats, but didn't in 2020. The reason? Messaging. That's what these House Democrats are aiming to combat. The messaging that these Democrats are, that is the wrong article here. Let's go ahead and check over. The idea that the Democratic Party is now the party of socialism has been pushed by many members of the Republican Party at the RNC, at press releases, through tweets, through Instagram Live, whatever it might be. At every step, the GOP was associating the Democratic Party with socialism. Now, this is not a new move. Socialism has been tied to the Democratic Party for as long as we've been in this whole war. Or not now, but, pretty much just whenever we've been against the idea of a communistic society or a form of government that was something that the Republican Party just didn't want, we have always seen this as a playing point, as a message for the American public that the Democratic Party is the party of socialism. Let's take a look at some of these quotes. From Kimberly Guilfoyle, says that Biden, Harris, and their socialist comrades is very, word choice is everything, chosen for a reason, will fundamentally change this nation. Nikki Haley, someone who has been a little bit less outspoken in terms of the Republican Party, said that referring to the squad, is that their vision for America is socialism. And we know that socialism has failed everywhere. RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel says Democrats have chosen to go down the road of socialism. Socialism, socialism, socialism. That's what this new political action committee is aiming to combat. They are aiming to combat this messaging that the Democratic Party is the party of socialism. They are aiming to combat this false claims that Biden is a socialist, that the Democratic Party is the party of socialism. And this messaging, I think, really proved to be detrimental to many members of the Democratic Party in battleground states. When you're looking in Florida here, some of these incumbents were ousted. Some of these incumbents were defeated when they should have been winning by sometimes large margins. It's very interesting that the results of the election ended up being beneficial for the GOP, but at the end of the day, when I was looking at the messaging from some of these candidates and from Donald Trump himself, I'm not necessarily super surprised. Just looking at these competitive districts, coming out or not coming out in complete repudiation of socialism proved to be detrimental. And while some can argue that left-wing policy can win in the future, the argument that the Democratic Party was the party of socialism certainly resonated, specifically with minority groups. But it pushed away Democrats by just the right amount. It wasn't as if 2018 was an obliterating victory for the GOP in some of these competitive districts. Looking at New Mexico's second, it was decided by less than 2 points. Same thing in South Carolina's 1st district. Heading on over to, Oklahoma's 5th, decided by less than 2 points. In 2018, the Democrats barely won these districts, but were expecting to do better, on the understanding that Biden was going to land them solidified victories. That wasn't the case. And looking at some of these Democrats that have jumped onto this list as well, it's not just those who have been ousted, as the article might suggest. We have Abigail Spanberger from the state of Virginia. She represents the 7th district there. I've seen some of her ads on my TV screen. It's not just that. It's not just her. We also see the representative, Tom Malinowski. I can't speak correctly today. Cindy Axe, I believe. Some of these names, hard to pronounce. Sorry about that. I don't have them down to a T, but please correct me down below. Things will get right. I promise. But looking at the Democrats here that have been arguing for this as well, some of them aren't even ousted, but they're afraid of being so. Over here in the 7th district in Virginia, it was surprisingly close. Looking at 2018, not so much. When you look at the amount that was won, yes, it was won by 2 points, but that was against an incumbent, and the factor of the incumbency is the strongest in House elections. If anything, I was expecting her to do better in 2020. as many people were. But then looking around the country, it's not just there. When you're looking at Iowa's 3rd district here, narrowly won something that the Democratic Party could very well lose in 2022. Some of these Democrats are jumping onto this pack and jumping onto this argument because they know they might be next. They could be the next, Joe Cunningham from South Carolina. They could be the next Kendra Horn from Oklahoma. They know that this messaging works because it worked in 2020 and it might work in 2022. That's why this pack is here to combat it. That's why this pack is here to avoid us reaching what they would assume is the worst election for the Democratic Party in the House. The 2010 midterm elections, in which the GOP picked up 63 seats in the House of Representatives. How many seats do the Republicans need to pick up to win the House majority in 2022? Certainly not 63, but 5. 5 seats, which they will undoubtedly get through redistricting. The GOP maintains control in many, many states in terms of redistricting. Florida, which will have 29 districts. Texas, which will have 39 districts. North Carolina, which will have 14. Georgia, which will have 14. Ohio, which will have 15. The large states, many of them, are controlled by the Democratic Party. By the Republican Party. And while the Democratic Party has been the party, and I'll tell you this honestly, has been the party that has pushed for backing major electoral reform, redistricting reform, they have opted in for independent commissions in certain states. But because the Democratic Party has opted for them, and many Republican states have not, the Republicans are able to leverage this. So while the Democrats might be able to counteract some of this by holding control in states such as California, which will have 53 or 52 districts depending on how many electoral votes they get, they could have free reign if they wanted to. And while the commission probably will work in their favor given the state, you also have to understand that these Republican legislatures, many of these states with Republican governors or with Republican supermajorities, meaning they can overturn the Democratic governor, they have free reign here. So these House Democrats are defending their seats because, number one, they know what might be next on that pickup screen on election night 2022 is Virginia's 7th, Iowa's 3rd, New Jersey's 7th. They also realize that redistricting is going to be a pain, to say the least. It is likely going to, before the election, single-handedly draw out the Democrats, quite literally draw them out of the House majority. And I think that the GOP is looking at 2010 as a template. But if Biden's popularity continues to remain in the positive, because we've actually seen it narrowly dip today, I think it'll be interesting if it holds in my next approval rating update video, that if they are able to work under the approval rating of Biden being mildly popular, they might actually be looking not 2010, but to 2 years after in 2012, where the Republicans were able to win 233 seats to the Democratic Party's 201, not necessarily the largest majority the GOP has had in the 21st century, but a majority regardless. And I think that looking at that 233 number, it's so appealing to the House Republicans because they know it's attainable. They can do this alone with simple redistricting, because the Democratic Party dropped the ball in 2020 with the redistricting process, with the state legislature races, with some of these local races. And I think that while the Democratic Party can reflect on that as much as they want and adjust it for winning in 10 years from now, the damage has already been done. And the GOP is likely to have a free reign in terms of redistricting, which means that gerrymandering is going to be at an all-time high following 2022. Because these districts, which were already meant to draw out Democrats from being in control in certain states, ultimately ended up with the GOP winning a number of seats. The Democratic Party winning a number of seats that they should not have won based off these districts. So I think they're going to be drawn even more out of favor for the Democratic Party for the fear of demographic shifts. Were very rapid in certain states, such as Texas, Arizona, Georgia. And I think that the Democratic Party may be able to pick up some legislature races or governorships in 2022. It really won't matter because 2020 was that census year that really broke the election for the House Democrats in 2022. But the main thing here is that this messaging that the Democratic Party is the party of socialism is going to be here to stay. And these Democrats are saying, I may have been defeated by such messaging. We may not have been able to acknowledge the messaging being so prevalent and so believable in the 2020 election. So now we're going to found a political action, found a political action committee, start a political action committee to combat this rhetoric. The Democrats are socialists. Combat this rhetoric that the Democratic Party is the party of socialism, the party of communism, the party of comrades. And I think that the moderate Democrats here might be combating the progressive policy in some of these states as well, simply because they know of its close association. But for the rest of these Democrats, I think that they are looking at this, the ones who are in the House that are moderate, that are jumping onto this pack because they know they might be next. And I think that this is the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party's moderate wing trying to save the House majority through messaging and combative messaging at that. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 United States midterm elections videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.